My name's Daniel. I'm 34, and if you had told me a year ago that my own brother would turn my mother's funeral into a circus of greed, I would have laughed it off as some twisted joke. But the truth is, the warning signs had been there all along. I just never wanted to admit how deep his entitlement ran. Growing up, my brother Michael and I couldn't have been more different. I was the quiet one, the kid who kept to himself, who found comfort in books and late-night chess games with mom. Michael, on the other hand, was the golden child in her eyes, but for all the wrong reasons. He was charming, loud, always demanding the spotlight, and somehow, mom indulged him. If he wanted a new bike, she found a way to make it happen. If I wanted help with college applications, the response was usually, "Ask your brother, he knows people." He never did, of course. Still, I loved my mom deeply. She worked 2 jobs to keep food on the table after Dad left, and while her favoritism hurt, I told myself it was just her way of coping. She saw Michael as fragile, someone who needed her more. And well, I convinced myself I was strong enough to need less. But Michael wasn't fragile. He was calculated. The kind of person who would skip rent because money is just paper and then show up in a new leather jacket the next day. I can't count the number of times I bailed him out of some mess, loan sharks, parking tickets, even a DUI he swore wasn't his fault. Each time, Mom pleaded with me to help him. "He's your brother," she'd say. "He'll change." He never did. When Mom got sick last year, the old family dynamics came back in full force. I was the one taking her to chemo, making her meals, sitting by her bedside when the nausea hit hard. Michael? He breezed in once every few weeks with flowers and posted a smiling selfie with her on Instagram, captioned, "Cherish every moment with the ones you love." People liked and commented, telling him what a devoted son he was. Meanwhile, I was scrubbing out vomit bowls and arguing with insurance reps at 3 a.m. I never resented Mom for loving him. It was her blind spot. But I did resent the way he turned everything into a performance, even her illness. Once, after she had a particularly rough treatment, I overheard him in the hallway telling one of his buddies on the phone, "Yeah, don't worry. Once she's gone, I'll finally be set. House, car, everything. It's all mine." My hands shook when I heard it. I wanted to confront him, but Mom was sleeping just a few feet away, and I didn't want to ruin the little piece she had left. So I swallowed it. Like always. When she passed, I was heartbroken but strangely relieved. Relieved that her suffering was over. Relieved that maybe, finally, Michael and I could set aside our differences and grieve her together. But deep down, I think I knew better. The funeral was held at the old family church, the same one where she had dragged us every Sunday morning as kids, even when we were half asleep from staying up too late the night before. The pews were full of distant relatives, neighbors, people she had touched with her warmth. The air smelled of lilies and candle wax, and for a moment, I let myself just sit there and think about her laugh, about the way she hummed when she cooked. Then Michael stood up. He was wearing a black suit that was clearly more expensive than anything he could actually afford. His tie was crooked, though, because he never paid attention to details. He cleared his throat dramatically, and the room hushed. "I just want to say," he began, holding up a folded document in his hand, "that I am so honored to have been chosen as the one to carry on Mom's legacy. She trusted me with everything. The house, her savings, even the lake cabin. She left it all to me." Gasps rippled through the room. A few people turned to look at me, their eyes wide. He waved the paper like a victory flag, smiling like he had just won a prize at the fair. "It's all here, signed and notarized. I'm the rightful heir." My stomach dropped, but not from shock. I knew this was coming. I had been expecting some stunt, though not this public, not at her funeral. And yet, instead of reacting, instead of shouting or grabbing the paper from him, I just sat there. I let the whispers spread. I let his grin widen. Because in the bag at my feet, tucked neatly inside a folder, was the paperwork he had no idea about. The paperwork that proved just how wrong he was. And as I sat there, forcing a small smile onto my face, I realized something. This was the moment everything would change. I didn't say a word. Not yet. But my mind was already spinning, already piecing together the long history of entitlement, the moments that had led us here, and the storm that was about to unfold. That was the day my brother thought he won. And that was the day I decided to let him dig his own grave, one smug word at a time. Michael's little announcement at the funeral spread like wildfire through the pews. I could feel the weight of everyone's eyes on me, waiting for me to argue or at least deny it. But I didn't. I kept my face calm, nodded once, and let the whispers grow. It wasn't the time or the place. Mom deserved silence, prayers, not a shouting match. Still, my silence only fed into Michael's ego. He mistook my restraint for surrender, which in hindsight was the best thing I could have done. After the service, people lined up to give condolences, but half of them were hesitant with me, like I was suddenly less important. Cousin Janet squeezed my hand and whispered, "I'm sure your mom had her reasons." Another aunt patted Michael on the back and said, "She always did love you more, didn't she?" I caught the flash of smugness on his face before he could tuck it away. That night, I stayed late at the house I had been living in for months to take care of Mom. I walked through the room slowly, touching the things she left behind. The throw blanket she always used on the couch, her half-finished crossword puzzle on the coffee table. Michael breezed in hours later, drunk on his own importance, smelling faintly of whiskey. "You can pack your things whenever," he said casually, tossing his suit jacket over the chair like he already owned the place. "I'll give you a week. 2 if you ask nicely." I turned to face him, biting back every angry word that wanted to spill out. "This is Mom's house," I said quietly. He grinned, holding up that paper again like it was a golden ticket. "Correction, it's my house now. She wanted me to have it. She knew you'd just waste it, like everything else." The audacity of it hit me like a punch, but again, I said nothing. I wanted him to believe he was untouchable, that arrogance was his weakness, and I needed it to grow unchecked. Over the next few weeks, the favoritism and manipulation came back in full force, stronger than ever. Relatives started calling me, not to check in on how I was coping, but to tell me I should respect Michael's wishes. Aunt Linda even said, "He's your older brother. You should be happy he's taking responsibility." Taking responsibility. Those words almost made me laugh. Michael hadn't taken responsibility for anything in his entire life. Meanwhile, he wasted no time playing the role of king. He invited friends over to Mom's house, giving them tours of what he claimed was his new property. I came home one evening to find beer cans scattered across the living room and someone's muddy footprints across Mom's favorite rug. I cleaned it all up alone, my hands shaking with quiet fury, while Michael lounged in the armchair and said, "Don't worry, I'll hire a maid once I cash out the estate." He started making comments about selling the place too. "Market's hot," he'd say, scrolling on his phone. "I could get top dollar. Maybe buy a condo downtown, you know? Something with a view." He never once said we. It was always I. And through it all, he paraded that document around. He showed it to relatives at Sunday dinners, to his friends, even to the pastor who had led Mom's service. Each time, he looked at me with this smug little smirk, daring me to contradict him. But I didn't. I just nodded and let him keep digging. The breaking point, at least for me, came when he started going through Mom's things. I walked into her bedroom one afternoon to find him rifling through her jewelry box, slipping her favorite necklace into his pocket. "What are you doing?" I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. He shrugged. "What? It's mine now. Besides, you never cared about this stuff anyway." That necklace wasn't just jewelry. It was the one she wore to every important event, from my high school graduation to her last chemo appointment. Seeing it vanish into his pocket lit a fire in me I hadn't felt in years. My nails dug into my palms, but I forced myself to breathe, to let it go, for now. Because while Michael thought he was winning, thought he had the entire family fooled, I had the real paperwork. And every time he waved his so-called inheritance around, every time he disrespected Mom's memory or treated me like I was nothing, it only made what was coming more inevitable. The tension in the house grew unbearable. We couldn't share a meal without him bragging about how he was going to renovate his kitchen or rent out his guest room for extra income. Friends stopped by less often because they didn't want to get caught in the crossfire. But I stayed. I stayed because I needed to see how far he'd push it, how blind he'd become to his own arrogance. And then one evening, at a family gathering he insisted on hosting in Mom's house, he took things one step further. He stood up in front of everyone, raised his glass, and said, "To Mom, for trusting me to carry the family legacy. And to Daniel, for being a good sport about it all." The room laughed politely, but I felt the sting of every word. He was no longer just claiming victory. He was mocking me in front of everyone. I lifted my glass too, forcing a smile. But inside, something shifted. I knew then that the storm wasn't far off. and I knew Michael had no idea what was coming. Michael's toast at that family gathering stuck with me like a thorn under my skin. For the next few days, I replayed it in my head, hearing the smugness in his voice, the way the relatives chuckled along like his words were harmless banter. But underneath that laughter, I felt something shift. It wasn't just that he was mocking me. It was the way he was rewriting our mother's story to suit his own narrative. Mom hadn't raised us to tear each other down. She had believed in unity, in family. And yet, here was Michael, turning her memory into a stage for his arrogance. A week later, the betrayal came crashing down in a way that left no room for doubt. It was a Saturday morning. I had gone out early to run errands, just trying to clear my head. When I came back, there was a for sale sign staked in the front yard. Bright red, bold letters, impossible to miss. My heart stopped when I saw it. I rushed inside, and there he was, leaning against the kitchen counter with a coffee in one hand and his phone in the other, grinning like a man who had just struck gold. "Oh, hey," he said casually, as if nothing was out of the ordinary. "You see the sign? What did you do?" My voice cracked as I spoke, the weight of it all hitting me at once. He waved his phone at me. "Relax. I called a realtor. Got a great deal lined up already. With the market this hot, I could have this place sold in a month. Easy money. This isn't just a house, Michael. This is Mom's home. You can't just—" "Yes, I can," he cut me off, his grin widening. "Because it's mine. She left it to me. You don't get a say." I stood there, staring at him, struggling to find words. The thought of strangers walking through the living room where Mom and I had spent nights watching old movies, of her bedroom being emptied and painted over, was unbearable. It wasn't just a betrayal of me. It was a betrayal of her. He wasn't done, though. He had to twist the knife. "Honestly," he said, sipping his coffee, "it's for the best. You're too sentimental, Daniel. You'd probably keep the place like some kind of shrine. Mom wouldn't want that. She'd want me to move forward, to enjoy life. And I will." I clenched my fists at my sides, forcing myself not to explode. He had no idea what Mom truly wanted. No idea of the conversations we had late at night when she thought she might not make it through another round of chemo. No idea of the promises she made to me about what she wanted to happen when she was gone. Then he pulled out another surprise. He slid an envelope across the counter toward me. "Oh, by the way, since you've been staying here rent-free all this time, I figured it's only fair you contribute before I sell. 2 months' rent. Consider it, helping me with expenses." I stared at the envelope, then back at him. He was serious. He wanted me to pay him rent for living in the house where I had taken care of Mom, where I had cooked her meals and carried her up the stairs when she was too weak to walk. Something inside me cracked then. Not loudly, not in an explosion of anger. It was quiet, cold, like ice settling into my veins. He looked at me, waiting for me to argue, to fight back. Instead, I picked up the envelope, folded it neatly, and slid it back into his pocket. "Keep it," I said softly. "You'll need it more than I will." He smirked, thinking he had won again. Glad we're on the same page. But he didn't see the shift in my eyes. He didn't hear the quiet vow forming in my mind. This wasn't just arrogance anymore. This was a line crossed. Selling the house wasn't about money. It was about erasing everything that mattered, everything Mom had left behind. That night, I sat in my room, staring at the folder in my bag. The real paperwork. The truth. The one thing Michael hadn't counted on. My hands trembled as I touched it, not from fear, but from the weight of what it meant. Michael thought he held all the cards. But soon, he was going to learn just how wrong he was. And for the first time since Mom's passing, I felt something other than grief. I felt resolve. The days after Michael planted that for sale sign felt like a slow collapse. Every morning I'd step outside, see it staked in the yard like a scarlet letter, and feel my stomach knot. Neighbors would stop by, some with kind words, others with nosy questions. "So, you're moving soon?" one asked as if it was already decided. I forced a smile, but inside I was unraveling. Michael reveled in it. He strutted around the house like a landlord inspecting his property. He hosted open houses without even telling me, parading strangers through the rooms where Mom's scent still lingered. I'd come home from work to find people wandering through the kitchen, pointing at the cabinets, asking what kind of countertop upgrades would add value. One woman even sat on Mom's old couch like she was testing it out, and when I told her politely it wasn't for sale, Michael chuckled and said, "Ignore him. He's sentimental." Every time, It felt like another piece of mom was being stripped away. The family didn't make it easier. Aunts and uncles who once praised me for taking care of mom now called to tell me I should support Michael's decision. Aunt Linda said, "It's not worth fighting over money, Daniel. Let your brother handle it." As if my grief was just greed in disguise. Even my cousin Janet, who used to confide in me, distanced herself. She sent one text. "He said you're trying to block the sale. Please don't cause trouble." It was like the entire family had chosen sides, and I was on the losing end. Inside the house, the tension grew unbearable. Michael would leave realtor flyers on the kitchen counter for me to accidentally see, circling the prices in bold marker. "Look at these offers," he'd say, grinning. "We're gonna be rich." Every word was salt in the wound. I tried ignoring him, but silence was exactly what he wanted. It gave him room to gloat. The worst moment came one evening when I found him in Mom's bedroom with a trash bag. He was clearing out her clothes, tossing them in like they were nothing more than old rags. I froze in the doorway. "Stop," I said, my voice shaking. He looked up, annoyed. "What?" "Someone's got to do it. Can't sell the place looking like a shrine. Buyers don't want to see a dead woman's wardrobe." I stepped in, grabbed the bag from his hands. My chest felt like it might burst. "These aren't just clothes, Michael. They're hers." He rolled his eyes. "You're too attached. It's unhealthy." The way he said it, like grief was some kind of weakness, cut deeper than I expected. I carried the bag out myself, but instead of throwing it away, I tucked it safely in the garage. Later that night, I pulled out Mom's old sweater, the one she wore whenever she baked. I buried my face in it and let the tears come, silent and raw. That was my rock bottom. Sitting alone in the garage, clutching a sweater like a lifeline, while my brother treated Mom's life as a quick payday. But even in that moment of despair, something shifted. My grief hardened into resolve. I realized I couldn't save the house. Not yet. He had the family convinced. He had a fake will in hand. And he had momentum. To fight him out right now would only make me look desperate, bitter. No one would believe me. So I stopped fighting. I moved through the house quietly, keeping my head down, cleaning up after his chaos. I let him think he had broken me. When he demanded I start paying rent, I nodded and said, "Fine." When he mocked me at family dinners, I smiled faintly and changed the subject. On the outside, I looked like a man defeated. But on the inside, I was planning. At night, I sat at my desk with Mom's real paperwork spread out in front of me. The will she had signed months before her death, tucked safely away where Michael would never look. The signatures, the notary stamp, all perfectly in order. I traced the letters of her name with my finger, remembering the night she handed it to me. "Promise me," she had whispered, her voice fragile, "that you'll protect what's important. Michael doesn't understand, but you do." And I promised. Now, every cruel word, every selfish act, every betrayal Michael committed was fuel. He thought I was broken. He thought I was done. But really, I was waiting, watching, letting him climb higher and higher on his own arrogance, so that when the fall came, it would be devastating. The funny thing about rock bottom is that once you're there, you stop being afraid of the fall. There's nowhere lower to go. And for the first time in weeks, I felt a strange sense of clarity. Michael thought he was untouchable, but he had no idea the ground beneath him was already cracking. After weeks of moving like a shadow in my own home, something inside me began to shift. Rock bottom had wrung the fight out of me, but once I'd sat in that darkness long enough, I realized it had also stripped away the fear. Michael couldn't humiliate me more than he already had. He couldn't make me feel smaller than I'd already been made to feel. And once that realization settled in, I started to rise. It began quietly. I poured myself into work. I'd been in a mid-level position at a logistics firm, mostly keeping my head down, grateful for stability. But now, I leaned into it with a new kind of energy. Late nights at the office, volunteering for projects others didn't want, taking extra courses online to sharpen my skills. My manager noticed. "Daniel, you've really stepped up," he said one afternoon after I'd pulled together a proposal that saved the company thousands. Within weeks, I was promoted. The bump in salary wasn't life-changing, but it was enough to give me breathing room. Enough to remind me that I had value outside the family chaos. Meanwhile, I began organizing the pieces of my personal life that Michael had trampled. I opened a new bank account, separate from anything tied to Mom's estate, and funneled my money there. I found a lawyer, quietly, discreetly, recommended by a colleague who had handled estate disputes before. We met in a small office downtown, the kind of place where the walls smelled faintly of coffee and old leather. I slid the folder across the desk, the one with Mom's real paperwork. The lawyer adjusted his glasses, skimmed through, and nodded. "This is airtight," he said. "Your brother's document won't hold up in court if it comes to that." Hearing those words was like feeling sunlight on my face after weeks of rain. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't powerless. I had truth on my side. But still, I held back. I wasn't ready to unleash it. Not yet. Timing would be everything. At the house, I maintained my role as the quiet, beaten-down brother. Michael bragged louder than ever. He threw parties, posted photos on social media about his inheritance, and even hinted online that he might be buying a luxury car soon. His friends hyped him up, and his ego ballooned. The more he flaunted, the more careless he became. He started ignoring bills, assuming money would magically fall into his lap once the house sold. I watched, waited, and collected every scrap of evidence. But outside the house, my life was rebuilding piece by piece. I reconnected with friends I'd neglected while caring for Mom. Old college buddies invited me out for dinners, and for the first time in years, I said yes. I joined a local chess club, something Mom had always encouraged me to do. Sitting across from strangers, focusing on the board, I felt alive again. Each move reminded me of her voice saying, "Think ahead, Daniel. Always think 3 steps ahead." It wasn't just about social life or hobbies, though. I started working out, too. Nothing extreme, just morning jogs, light weights, taking care of my body after months of neglect. Slowly, my shoulders straightened, my energy returned. People at work and even acquaintances began to notice. One colleague said, "You look different, like you're carrying yourself taller." All of it fed into a growing sense of quiet power. The final spark came from an unexpected place. One evening, while cleaning out boxes in the garage, I found Mom's old journals. Neat handwriting, pages filled with her reflections. On one page, she had written, "I worry about Michael. He's lost in his own world. But Daniel understands. He'll protect what matters." I sat there for hours, rereading those words, tears in my eyes. They weren't just words, they were validation. Proof that she had seen me, truly seen me, even when I felt invisible. With that, my resolve crystallized. Michael thought he had me cornered, that he could erase me and cash in on Mom's memory. But in reality, I was rising, financially, emotionally, and strategically. I was no longer the brother who swallowed his pride and stayed quiet. I was becoming the brother who would take everything Michael thought he owned and dismantle his fantasy piece by piece. And the best part? He didn't even notice the change. Because he was too busy gloating, too busy flaunting, too busy living in the illusion of his victory. All the while, I was 3 steps ahead. By the time autumn rolled in, the house felt less like a home and more like a stage for Michael's ego. He was holding louder parties, bragging about bigger offers, even going so far as to measure the walls as if renovation crews were already lined up outside. But while he measured ceilings and daydreamed about penthouse condos, I was measuring something else, his blind spots. At work, my promotion gave me not only better pay, but also new connections. Our company had a division that dealt with real estate logistics, and through casual conversations over coffee, I picked up on how property sales really worked. I learned about liens, title searches, escrow accounts, the kind of details Michael had never bothered to understand. The more I absorbed, the clearer it became. My brother's entire plan was built on the flimsiest foundation. He had no idea how complicated the process really was. One afternoon, my lawyer called me into his office with a folder of documents. "We pulled the deed," he said, sliding papers across the desk. "Your mother's will, the real one, names you as executor. That means nothing can be sold, transferred, or claimed without your authorization." I froze, staring at the words. Executor, not Michael, me. The power wasn't just theoretical, it was legal, binding, unshakable. My brother could wave his forged document in the air until he was blue in the face, but in the eyes of the law, he had no control. I walked out of that office with the folder tucked under my arm, feeling taller, stronger. It was like carrying a weapon no one else could see. And I wasn't just armed with paperwork. I had leverage now. Back at the house, Michael continued to play the role of lord and master. He brought a realtor over one evening, parading her through the kitchen. I leaned against the counter, listening as she asked basic questions about the deed and title. Michael stumbled through answers, waving his will like it was proof enough. The realtor raised an eyebrow. "We'll need to verify this with the county records," she said cautiously. I almost laughed. The trap was already closing, and he didn't even know. At the same time, I began documenting everything. Photos of the parties he threw in Mom's house, notes about the jewelry he pocketed, even screenshots of his social media posts bragging about his inheritance. Piece by piece, I was building a file that showed just how reckless and entitled he had become. If this ever went public, or to court, he'd be shredded. The setup wasn't just legal or strategic, though. It was personal. One evening, after everyone else had gone to bed, I sat in the garage with Mom's journals again. On the last page she wrote before she passed, she left a note to me. "Daniel, remember, patience is not weakness. Sometimes the strongest move is to wait until the board is set." Her words lit a fire in me. This wasn't just about protecting the estate anymore. It was about honoring her, about proving that her trust in me wasn't misplaced. Meanwhile, Michael was too busy plotting his future. He bragged to his friends about the cars he would buy, the vacations he would take. One night, I overheard him on the phone with a dealer, asking about a down payment for a BMW he had no way of affording. He was counting money he didn't have yet, stacking his fantasies higher and higher. And I let him, because the higher he climbed, the harder the fall would be. The final piece of the setup came unexpectedly. I was at the county clerk's office, finalizing paperwork with my lawyer, when the clerk leaned over and said, "Funny thing, your brother submitted a will last month. We flagged it. The notary listed doesn't exist." That was it. The crack in his armor I had been waiting for. Not only did I have the real will, but now I had proof his was fraudulent. I walked out of that office with a calm I hadn't felt in months. The stage was set. I had the law, the evidence, the patience, and most importantly, the truth. Michael thought he was playing a game of checkers, but I was playing chess, and the board was almost ready for the final move. The night before everything came to a head, I barely slept. I lay awake in my room, staring at the ceiling, rehearsing every possible reaction, every smug line Michael might throw at me. My chest was tight, but it wasn't fear, it was anticipation. Months of humiliation, silence, and patience had led me here. Michael had scheduled what he proudly called a closing celebration. He invited the realtor, a few friends, and even some family over to the house, claiming he'd finalized everything and was about to be a rich man. I didn't argue, didn't warn him, didn't stop it. I just told him I'd be there. The next evening, the living room was full of chatter and clinking glasses. Michael was in his element, pacing around with a drink in hand, telling anyone who would listen about his plans for his windfall. "The deposit hits next week," he boasted, "and then it's goodbye to this old dump. Hello, downtown skyline view." Laughter rippled around the room. He was glowing with self-importance. I sat quietly in the corner, folder on my lap, watching. My heart pounded, but my face stayed calm. I let him talk, let him build himself up higher, until finally, the realtor cleared her throat. "Michael," she said, glancing at her notes, "we've run into an issue with the deed transfer. It seems your name isn't listed anywhere. Legally, you don't have authority to sell this property." The room went silent. Michael chuckled, waving his forged will like it was a magic wand. No, you must be mistaken. I've got it all right here. Signed and notarized." That was my cue. I stood slowly, smoothing the folder in my hands, and stepped forward. "Actually," I said, my voice steady, "she's not mistaken." Michael turned to me, irritation flashing in his eyes. "Stay out of this, Daniel. You don't know what you're talking about." I opened the folder and pulled out the real paperwork, placing it on the coffee table with deliberate care. "This," I said, tapping the notarized will with Mom's signature, "is the actual will. The one Mom signed months before she passed. Verified, filed, and naming me as executor." Gasps filled the room. The realtor leaned over, eyes scanning the document, then nodded slowly. This is legitimate. This is binding." Michael's face drained of color. He snatched up his will, waving it desperately. "No, this is the one." She left it to me. The realtor shook her head. "The notary on your document doesn't exist. This won't hold up in court." I locked eyes with him then, calm and steady. "You paraded that paper around, mocked me in front of family, trashed Mom's house, and thought you'd get away with it. But the truth was always going to catch up with you. The silence was heavy. His friends shifted uncomfortably, clearly realizing the man they'd been cheering on wasn't the victor he claimed to be. Family members who had sided with him avoided my gaze. Michael's voice cracked. "You can't do this. You can't take it all away from me." I leaned in slightly, lowering my voice so only he could hear. "I'm not taking anything away. Mom never gave it to you in the first place." He staggered back, his confidence unraveling in front of everyone. The swagger, the arrogance, it all bled out of him in seconds. And I just stood there, calm, collected, watching as the empire he'd built on lies collapsed. The revenge wasn't loud. It wasn't explosive. It was quiet, undeniable, and final. But what came next, how Michael reacted, how the family shifted, how the fallout unfolded, that would prove just how deep the cracks went. The silence after my words lingered like smoke. Michael's mouth opened and closed, searching for something, anything, that might save face. But nothing came. The realtor quietly gathered her notes, sliding the fake will aside like it was a crumpled napkin. His friends, the same ones who'd cheered him on and posted photos of his big win, exchanged uneasy glances and muttered excuses before slipping out the door. Within minutes, the room thinned, leaving only family and the weight of Mom's absence pressing down on us. Aunt Linda, the loudest voice who had told me to respect Michael's wishes, was the first to speak. Her face was pale. We didn't know," she whispered. I didn't look at her. The truth was, they hadn't wanted to know. Believing Michael had been easier than facing the fact that they had let him trample me while I cared for Mom. Michael dropped into a chair, his head in his hands. "This isn't fair," he muttered. "She always loved me more. She wanted me to have it. You can't just." "She loved both of us." I cut in sharply. My voice surprised even me. Firm, steady, no room for argument. "But love isn't entitlement. She trusted me to protect what mattered. And I will." For the first time in my life, he had no comeback. The bluster was gone. The arrogance had evaporated. He looked small, like the child he had always been underneath the bravado. Someone who had coasted on charm and manipulation until the foundation cracked beneath him. The fallout was swift. The realtor dropped him as a client immediately, sending a polite but firm email the next day stating she could not proceed with fraudulent documentation. Word spread quickly among extended family. The cousins who had mocked me behind my back went silent. Those who had doubted me now reached out with apologies that landed flat. "We didn't realize," they said, as though their ignorance absolved them. I accepted their words politely, but never forgot how quickly they had chosen his side. Michael spiraled. Without the sale, without the sudden windfall he'd promised himself, the walls closed in. Debt collectors called. The luxury car he had bragged about turned out to be a lie. The dealership had canceled the deal when his financing fell through. Friends who once tagged along to his parties vanished when the free drinks and promises dried up. He drifted, aimless and bitter, his world reduced to shadows of what he thought he deserved. As for me, life didn't suddenly become easy, but it became mine. I stayed in Mom's house for a while, not because I wanted the bricks and wood, but because it felt right to honor her space. I fixed it up slowly, repainting walls, restoring the garden she had loved, framing one of her journal entries, and hanging it in the hallway. Every improvement wasn't just for me. It was for her. And the family? They learned to see me differently. No longer the quiet one they could overlook. No longer the shadow next to Michael's spotlight. At gatherings, people turned to me for steadiness, for the calm voice of reason. Not because I sought it, but because I had proven that strength wasn't in shouting the loudest. It was in patience, in letting truth speak for itself. One evening, months later, I stood in the backyard under the fading light, holding Mom's old sweater, the one I'd clung to at my lowest. I breathed in its faint scent, now mixed with time and memory, and felt a peace I hadn't known in years. Michael had once sneered that I was too sentimental, too attached. But he was wrong. Sentiment wasn't weakness. It was connection. And connection was what he had never understood. I looked at the house behind me, the lights glowing softly through the windows, and thought of her words in that last journal entry. Patience is not weakness. Sometimes the strongest move is to wait until the board is set. The board had been set. The game had been played. And in the end, the checkmate was mine.